Okie doke, we'll go ahead and get started. We have met the quota because the quota is 2 or 3, right? That's what Jesus says. That's right. Okay, well, today, the 16th of February, just happens to be a commemoration, and it is the commemoration of the birth of Philip Melanchthon. Have you heard of Philip Melanchthon?
I have.
Oh, good. Pastor Sheridan talked about Philip Melanchthon. Good. So, yeah, Philip Melanchthon, we actually owe a great deal to. He started teaching at the University of Wittenberg about the same time as Luther, and the two of them became very good friends. Now, they were very, very different people, okay? Now, whereas Luther was a very irascible and excitable fellow, Melanchthon was calm and ironical and nice, and they were both incredibly smart. But Luther was the pastor, and he was the biblical expert. And Melanchthon was very well versed in the scriptures, but he was coming more from the academic, what we call the humanist tradition. So not humanism in the way that we talk about humanism today, like secular humanism. But what was going on by the eve of the Reformation was what we call the Renaissance. And the major emphasis in the Renaissance was going back to the classics, back to the Greek, back to the Latin, and actually that was helpful for the Reformation, because when they started talking about going back to the sources, this was part of the rediscovery of what the Bible actually teaches, because they went past the Latin Bible that they were using back to the Greek and back to the Hebrew. So Melanchthon was a layman. He was never ordained, but he was very theologically insightful. And Philip Melanchthon actually wrote the Augsburg Confession, which was presented before the Holy Roman Emperor in 1530. And I think next year, 2023, we're going to have to do a study of the Augsburg Confession, because it just so happens that the day that the confession was presented to the emperor was June the 25th. And that happens to fall on a Sunday. So we can have another Reformation celebration. So sometime next year in Bible class, we'll actually look at the Augsburg Confession. But because you should read it. The Augustana, which is the Latin name, is actually our defining document as Lutherans. We all know the Catechism, but the most concise summary of what we believe doctrinally speaking is in the Augsburg Confession. And it is kind of neat that Melanchthon is the one who wrote it, right? Because we're named for the other guy. We're the Lutherans, but we're not a Luther cult. And so it's significant, I think, that our main confession of faith was not written by Martin Luther, although he gave his approval. He did say that Melanchthon was a little nicer than he was. He said, I wouldn't have treaded as lightly. But anyway, so that's Philip Melanchthon. He wrote the Augsburg Confession, and then the Roman Catholic theologians responded. They wrote their Confutation. And so Melanchthon, not knowing how to let anything go, decided that he was going to write the defense, or the apology of the Augsburg Confession. And then I think there was actually a response to the apology, and at that point he was like, never mind. But nevertheless, so 2 of our confessional documents as Lutherans, written by Melanchthon. So that is today. Today is the commemoration of his birth. Now you're going to have to excuse me because the internet is down, so I have no sheet for you. So we're going to do it old school. I wrote some things on the board, but I'm going to have to pray. Actually, no, I've got the prayer in front of me. Yeah, never mind. Pay me no attention. Let us pray. Of course, if I can, find the prayer. There we go. Almighty God, we praise you for the service of Philip Melanchthon to the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, and the renewal of her life in fidelity to your word and promise. Raise up in these gray and latter days faithful teachers and pastors, inspired by your Spirit, whose voices will give strength to your church and proclaim the ongoing reality of your kingdom, through your Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Okay, there was something I wanted to use the phone for. I wanted to share with you. I've got for you our little update on our friends in Finland, because on Monday, the they heard closing arguments for their trial. They're going to take until March the 30th to hand down the verdict. But I wanted to read just a little bit. This is from the International Lutheran Council. Just some impressions from the bishop on the trial. What they're pushing for right now is they've decided not to talk about imprisonment, but the Prosecutor General of Finland has requested that the court impose the maximum criminal victim compensation on Dr. Räsänen, and that is valued at 120 days of personal income. For the bishop, they want him to pay the equivalent of 60 days of personal income. And they're further going to fine the Luther Foundation, which published the pamphlet that the lady wrote, 10,000 euros. So that's what they're hoping to accomplish if they indict them. So the trial began January the 24th. Now this is just fascinating to me. In her opening remarks, the Prosecutor General suggested that the trial was in no way about the Bible. But over the course of her presentation, and throughout her argumentation and questioning, she returned repeatedly to discussions of the nature of Scripture, the defendant's hermeneutic, in other words, the way that he interprets the Bible, and the Christian understanding of sin. So they were having a theological conversation in a court of law, which is very interesting. Now the bishop says, I assume the prosecutor would not go into this matter of the Bible and theology. I thought this would be a cold juridical handling of these matters, and that I was truly surprised. Although she stated this was not about the Bible or about freedom of religion or opinions, he said, she went quite deeply into theological issues. The prosecutor questioned the bishop on his understanding of the relationship between the Old and New Testaments, which is a theological matter, the status of biblical and civil law, and so forth. Quote, a conflation of juridical and theological argumentation, unquote, which seemed remarkable in a civil court. Worse, Bishop Poihola said, was the prosecutor's attempt to link those who accept historic Christian teaching on sexuality with those who would kill or rape in the name of religion. So, what's fascinating about that is that she wants to talk to the bishop, and I assume the lady as well, about religious matters. So, now, if the law is on the books, she would think this would be a fairly cut and dry case. The question would be, is what they said and what they wrote, does it match the Finnish definition of hate speech? And you and I might not like that, but if it does, then there you go, there's the case. But this is somebody with a legal mind, by the way. The Prosecutor General of the country wants to talk about, how do you read the Old and the New Testament? What do you think about sin? And I think what that goes to show is that you know what this is really about. And this is why we have such grave misgivings about this, because it's actually about the suppression of Christianity itself, that this is actually state-sponsored persecution. Because otherwise, implement the law, okay? If you're going to do something, do it all the way, all right? If the law says I can't do it, then go ahead and hand down the sentence. But that's not what they're concerned with. Because he wants to talk about, so what's your doctrine? I thought they had religious freedom in Finland. So I just find that fascinating, and it goes to show what this is actually about. So we have to wait until March the 30th to hear what the court will decide.
Kind of sounded like they were getting a lot of pressure for the defendants, you know.
From certain, because the International Lutheran Council, they sent a letter, and basically they had the representatives of all the church bodies that we're in fellowship with, because we were on that list, condemning the entire thing. And then we had a few members of the United States Senate who wrote the Finnish ambassador registering their protest. But apart from that, I haven't heard anything.
Can you believe that the Bible is
on trial?
in court, you
Well.
know, I mean, at this time in our lives, well, this late, I mean, and you imagined it in the past, but not now, and not in the United States.
Yeah.
Or, you know, at this time.
In the Western world, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that, I mean, and you know, I think it's symptomatic of something else, which is that increasingly we live in a world where the cultural footprint of Christianity is being completely effaced. So, if you ever have conversations like, and we're not even legal matters, but if you have conversations about this with people you know, and I'm not trying to be uncharitable, but there are people, they don't live in the world that we do. And if they want to talk to you about what we believe about sexuality, because I've had this experience, they're like, well, what do you think about X, Y, and Z? I said, well, I believe that God instituted marriage. I think he knows what it is. You know, it's between a man and a woman. It's for procreation and companionship. And they go, oh, so you hate homosexuals. And they don't mean to like slander you or put you down or anything like that. They just, in their calculus, they don't understand how those two things are not synonymous. And so now you have a lady who's smart, a lawyer, the prosecutor general of the country. She doesn't understand the distinction between these two things. Like, she doesn't get the distinction between, you believe things that I personally, and probably most people in Finland, to be honest, don't believe. So it's like, okay, but you have to separate that from the legal matter here. And there's no comprehension of what's going on. So we're increasingly in this world where we don't have any sort of common rationale that we share with people outside the church. And for a long time, everything kind of went hand in glove together, you know, where we could understand how some of our legal commitments and our culture and all these things lined up. Not that they're the same thing, but they lined up with the teaching of the Bible and the influence of Christianity. And now you see that we're not operating on the same, because it's not getting through. You know, it's like, this is my doctrine. You believe that it's all right to kill and rape people. Can you imagine a prosecutor saying that to somebody? What's your crime? I go to church, you know, I'm married to a woman. That's about it. You know, well, you must support the Crusades or any of these other things. So it's an eye-opening kind of thing. And nobody else seems, I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's more pushback in Finland itself, but just another day. So something to consider and think about. Do you have anything else you want to talk about with that?
Just in addition to, I agree with everything you just said. This particular topic is discussed on Lutheran Public Radio, and if you want to hear it, you just have to go online and listen to it. And so our synod is not only projecting and teaching the correct thing, but we're discussing this conflict that we have with the world. That our faith and our beliefs and our doctrines are in direct conflict with the world.
Yeah.
And how that's trying to be resolved.
Yeah. Lutheran Public Radio is great. If you ever want to listen to that online, it's good stuff. It's like public radio, but for Lutheran.
For Lutherans, yeah.
So hence the name, LPR.
Well,
Yeah, so go ahead, Joe.
I'm sorry, but you know that if this comes out the way that they hope it will, with the, I mean, they hope that they're going to get convicted. The problem is that what happens over there is going to come over here. You just know that what happens someplace else is going to happen here.
Yeah. Well, and what is the saying? Is it that politics is downstream from culture, or the other way around? Got to think about that. But it's true, yeah. I mean, because what it reflects fundamentally is it reflects what people already believe, what's already in their heart. And and precedent is a dangerous thing, even in an international sense, especially when we're so linked, you know, that now apparently what happens in the Ukraine is our business, which I'm trying to figure out. But we don't have to dwell on that. But yeah. One is downstream of the other, and I always have to think about which it is. But so keep that in your prayers. Alrighty. Anything you wanted to talk about with the sermon? About being dissatisfied? The virtue of dissatisfaction. Kind of fits very well with Job, I thought. I tried to make some connections with Job, just for you. All right, I did actually say that we'll try to break early, just so everybody who's setting up for the funeral can do his thing. I'll decide later on if I'm going to abide by that. We'll see how it goes. We'll see if we're holding anybody up. But anyway, so like I said, I'm afraid I don't have a new sheet for you. If you have last time's sheet, that should be good for part of the time. And other than that, we'll have to look things up. Oh, technology. So, all right. We did start Job chapter 1. And what we heard up to this point, we were introduced to Job, who's blameless and upright. And remember, that's one of the key things that we're keeping in mind. That Job is righteous and blameless. The things that Job is going to experience, like the bishop and the doctor, they have done nothing wrong. And in fact, it's precisely because he's righteous that he's experiencing these trials and things. And we also got a little view into the heavenly throne room with the angels of God presenting themselves before God, and Satan is among them. So that's essentially where we are. The other thing I would say before I forget, so we're in Job 1 and 2, that's the prologue to Job. The majority of the book, as we talked about last time, is the dialogue between Job and his three friends when they're struggling with the issue of why is it that Job is suffering if he is indeed righteous. So we'll hopefully, I don't know, maybe we'll get into that today. On a normal day, we definitely would. The one thing to keep in mind with that, when we read the dialogues, is that remember, God says at the end that Job has spoken rightly of him. His three friends have not. What that means is there is a sizable chunk of the book of Job that is false doctrine. So Job is not really the kind of book that you want to just, flip open and start reading chapter 8 and being like, oh, that sounds really good. Because actually chapter 8 is, I believe it's Bildad, his accusation of Job. And God is so angry with Bildad at the end of it that he would like to smite him. But for the fact that Job intercedes and prays for Bildad and the other two guys. So I'll remind you of that again, but that's just something to keep in mind. So, but we're still not there. I did promise that we would talk about what the devil is doing in heaven. What the devil. So let's do that. I wrote on the board, since we've gone back to the 20th century, I didn't print these out for you, but could we have the old-fashioned Bible drill? Would somebody look up for us Luke 10:18? Somebody for John 12:31. Then we have this longer passage, Revelation 12:7 through 12. In that order would be good. So you don't be bashful if you want to read.
I got 10:18.
Okay, Dort has Luke 10:18.
He replied, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven.
Okay, very to the point, very punchy. What we're talking about here is, in the book of Job, Satan has the effrontery to come into heaven and speak to God directly. Not usually what we think of the devil as doing. And Dort had asked the question last week, well, I thought that Satan was kicked out of heaven. And he was. What we assume a lot of the time is actually something that's not in the scripture. So if you read Paradise Lost by John Milton, which is great reading, John Milton very speculatively puts together, that the devil before he fell was in heaven, he was kicked out of heaven, and then the temptation of man follows that. That's not exactly, well, it's not actually at all recorded in the scriptures. We don't hear any condemnation of the devil until God comes to the garden. He knows that Adam and Eve have sinned, and then he curses the serpent. Now, if there's any cursing of the devil prior to that, we don't know about it. But even at this point, after the fall, in the book of Job, Satan is in heaven. Now, what Dor just read, the words of Jesus, is Jesus actually tells us, and it's going to get more specific, but what Jesus had said, the Dor read, that he saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Now, that still doesn't give you a specific timestamp on when it is that Satan is kicked out. But the context of Luke 10 is at the beginning of the chapter. This is when Jesus commissions his 72 disciples, and he sends them out to preach and to heal and to cast out the demons. So they go out and they do that. Then they come back, and they're like, well, this is pretty cool. Did you know that the demons fled at our command? And Jesus says, you should rejoice rather that your names are written in heaven. But that comment in verse 18, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven, is followed the sending out of the disciples to preach and to heal and to cast out demons. So the beginning of Satan's fall is actually not in Genesis. It's not in any of the Old Testament or at the beginning of creation. But the falling of Satan like lightning from heaven happens in the ministry of Jesus. All right? Usually not how we think about that. So that's the first one.
Just that he was defeated because he wanted to take over from God, and so he still stayed there even though...
Well, that's a good question, because, see, that's the other thing, and I would like to know, I just haven't done enough research about it. I want to know where the idea comes from, because it's just kind of in our collective, just kind of the assumptions that we make, that the reason that Satan is kicked out of heaven is because Satan wants to take the place of God. That's the other thing that I can't exactly find in the scriptures. And the other view, and I haven't researched it as much as I would like, but generally the ancient view was not so much that Satan wants to take the place of God, but Satan would rather take the place of man. And there's a couple of places, because man, unlike the angels, has a capacity for family relationship with God. And if you think about it, the way that Satan takes up arms against God is through the temptation and the fall of man. And there's somewhere in the scripture that it talks about how the devil does what he does out of envy. And it's the envying of man. Now, whether that is 100% true, I'm not certain. But the thing is, with the picture that we have, that God was on the throne, Satan decided, I will kick God off the throne and I'll reign as God. That is not exactly explicitly stated. So what we're going to get to is that the defeat, what it means for Satan to be cast out of heaven, is the defeat of Satan and all evil by Christ. But that begins when Jesus himself comes. They know the devil's evil, and God has this kind of containment policy with evil that he allows, as we know with Job. He just allows him to go ahead and have his season, but their final conflict is coming. So, anything about that before we look at the next one? Okay. Who has John 12:31?
I got it.
Okay, John, go ahead.
Now is the judgment of this world. Now will the ruler of this world be cast out.
Okay, thank you. These are again the words of Jesus. And John 12, if you're looking at your headings, this is happening after Jesus has ridden into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. And John tells us about the Greeks who come to see Jesus. And all of this dialogue happens when Jesus is there in the temple. The one that follows that, so Jesus says now, as in today, Palm Sunday, Now is the judgment of this world. Now the ruler of this world is cast out, which is very similar language to the casting out of heaven, falling from heaven. And what is the thing that kicks the devil out? You actually see that in the next verse, in 32. Jesus says, "And I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all men to myself." He said this to show by what kind of death he was going to die. And that's something that we see throughout the Gospel of John, that the lifting up of the Son of Man is not him being worshipped or glorified. Well, it is him being glorified. It's not him being worshipped and honored. He is literally being lifted up. And if you stay for the funeral today, we'll hear about that in John chapter 3, when the comparison that Jesus draws is he says, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, remember when everybody was falling dead from snake bites? They had to look at this thing. He said, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that everyone who believes in him may have eternal life. That's the lifting up. So he's connected these two things together. Now is the judgment of this world, and now the ruler of this world, the devil, is cast out. He's cast out by the lifting up of the Son of Man on the cross. So it is his defeat, because the accusation of the devil that we see, like in Job, that Satan brings before God is finally silenced by the crucifixion and the death of Jesus. So, now we are looking forward to the time when these things will be more manifestly clear, and the devil, as we read about in the book of Revelation, is cast into the lake of fire and these things. But the actual defeat is what happens there. So, before we look at the last one, you tracking? Any question, any comment? All right. Revelation 12. The caveat with this one is that Revelation is a highly symbolic book. Always have to say that. So, the reason that we looked at these two passages first is because one of our cardinal rules of reading the Bible well is understanding Scripture interprets Scripture. That's why we jump all over Bible country. And the other thing is that the clear passages interpret the ones that are more obscure. Okay? Because the words of Jesus, while they do have a mysterious quality about them, the straightforward teaching of Jesus is clearer than when you read Revelation, for example. And we did, the veterans up here, we did Revelation in Sunday Bible study about a year and a half ago. Took about a year and a half too, I think. But we delved into these things. And maybe we'll do that again one day. But I did it to get it out of the way. Everybody wants to do Revelation. So anyway, so just keep Revelation as a very symbolic book. But you can see, because you know the whole story, this is helpful. We use the words of Jesus and his life as the interpretive key. Would somebody read for us then this crazy vision that we have in Revelation 12, 7 through 12, please?
And there was more in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. And the great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ. For the accuser of our brothers, who accuses them before our God day and night, has been hurled down. They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of the testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Therefore, rejoice, you heavens, and you dwell in them. You who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down with you. He is filled with fury because he knows that his time is short.
Okay, thank you.
By that means that he is gonna disappear at a certain point?
That's a good question. All right, so to get to that, this is what we call the war in heaven. And you see, on the side of the good guys, we have Michael and the angels fighting against the dragon and his angels, the demons, in other words. So, that being the case, all right, so we know that the dragon, the serpent, is the devil. Michael is one of the archangels mentioned in the Bible. And so, again, something contrary to our expectation, that the war happens in heaven. Not on earth, not somewhere else, but it's actually within the presence of God. Now, Michael and the angels triumph over the devil. And it says, and notice though, if you look in verse 9, where it is that he is thrown down to. To the earth, right? Not to hell, right? That is, again, as we said, this is future. That Jesus says in Matthew 25 at the final judgment, depart from me into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. See, hell is also a punishment for the devil. So the cartoons are wrong, okay? The devil is not the Lord of hell. God, actually. He's the Lord of all things. But the devil, the dragon, is thrown down from heaven to the earth, which is not so great for the earth. But what is good is you see in first the loud voice in heaven in 10 announces, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ has come. Why? It says, because the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. Okay, so we talked about last time, Satan is not a name. Satan is the word in Hebrew means accuser. This is the role that he takes for himself, that he accuses the brethren. He accuses the Christian, really all the human race, before God. That's what he's doing with Job. It's not just that Satan is stirring the pot, but what he does is he falsely accuses Job, because the devil's accusations are always false. He falsely accuses Job and says the only reason that Job fears you is because of all the stuff that you've given, which we know is not true. But he said, if you take it away, then he will curse you. God takes the bet, but that is a false accusation. It's not true. And so this is how the devil gets his kicks, is that he accuses the saints before God. There comes a certain point, though, that God no longer tolerates this. And so he says this is the moment when the salvation of our God has come. And again, the salvation of our God, and he says the authority of his Christ. That comes not in the far, far future. That comes with Jesus himself coming to earth. That God, in Christ, he takes away the accusation of the law. He blots out our sins. He accounts the entire world as righteous before God, such that the devil's accusation doesn't count for anything anymore. And that decisive moment happens in Jesus' own coming. And the next verse clarifies that, because in verse 11, and this is kind of cool, John doesn't just speak of it in terms of the conquest of Jesus over the devil, because the great thing is we all share in this. We share in Jesus' victory. What we hear about in our funeral sermon today is that we share in Jesus' resurrection, right? So, verse 11, it's all his work, but we share in that. They, the saints, our brothers, have conquered him, the devil, by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. By their simple confession of faith, they've conquered him. For they love not their own lives even unto death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. So that's the times in which we inhabit. The devil is defeated. The devil actually is on the run, but this does not stop him from continuing in what he was doing before. Right? The devil is the suicide bomber. He knows the end is coming. His idea is, how much destruction can I reap before I'm dead? right? That's his thought. That's who the devil is. But so even though it's fairly symbolic, what you see here is that this is accomplished. This dethroning, this defenestration, whatever you want to call it, of the devil happens by the blood of the Lamb, by the salvation coming into the world that Christ accomplishes. So, no longer does the devil accuse us before God in heaven. Now that he's down upon earth, he just goes right to you and he accuses you in your conscience. This is what he does. But not yet in the time of Job, because in the time of Job, the devil is still kind of free to sashay right into the courtroom and make his accusations against whoever. But in our case, we're talking about Job. So any questions about that or comments? Okay. Good deal. So back to Job. So we heard then last time. Well, I'll read it a little bit for you, and then we'll look at something new. So beginning in Job 1, verse 6. Now there was a day when the sons of God, the angels, came to present themselves before the Lord. And Satan, and in your mind you have to say, the accuser. The accuser also came among them. The Lord said to the accuser, "From where have you come?" Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil?" Then Satan answered the Lord and said, "Does Job fear God for no purpose? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land." So he's done two things, really. Not only has God protected Job, but he has increased all of his blessings. So life is good, right? Like I said in the sermon, don't say that. Life is good for Job. 11, but stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, all that he has is in your hand. The condition is only against him, his life. Do not stretch out your hand." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. All right, and that's the setup then, that God takes the bet. Very foolish thing, as we said, for the devil to do. But nevertheless, the devil's purpose is really not even to triumph. The devil's purpose is he just has to inflict this suffering, even if Job doesn't give in to the temptation to curse God. Nevertheless, he wants to make him suffer. And God is fine with this. God doesn't say, get out, leave. He says, if that's what you want to do, then you just have to abide by my condition, which does go to show that even when God gives the devil free rein, it's not entirely free, because God does have the authority and the power to impose this condition on the devil. Although the devil would like probably to kill Job. I don't know. I don't know if he would, actually. I take that back. The devil really doesn't want to kill you. See, because the thing is, if you ever read the Screwtape Letters, oh, you should read the Screwtape Letter. It's a book by C.S. Lewis. It's what you call an epistolatory novel, which means that it's written like letters, okay? And, what was his name? Wormwood. Yeah, it was Wormwood. My dear Wormwood. Wormwood is a junior devil in hell. And Screwtape is his affectionate uncle. Screwtape is a senior devil. And the entire book is about, every demon gets a patient, okay? And the purpose of the work of the demon is to get this person to who they call our Father below, as opposed to our Father who art in heaven. They refer to the other guy, they call him the enemy. This is a great book. And the great thing about it is, I think actually, that hell is run like a bureaucracy. But the good thing about this book is that it gives you a lot of insight into the nature of temptation and sin. And it's not meant to make you go, oh, does that mean there's a devil at my shoulder, every time, I'm tempted to sin. But it really is a very insightful book. And I don't know, maybe one day we'll read it. But
Can you write it on your board?
yeah, sure, I can. But
Much a visual on it.
what happens is, I don't want to give you too much away. It was published 80 years ago, so sorry. Don't be too upset. But Wormwood, he has his patient, and I think it's about the third or the fourth letter that Screwtape writes to Wormwood, and he says, "My dear Wormwood, I note with grave displeasure that your patient has become a Christian." So then the rest of the book has to be, so how do we get the guy to fall away? Okay. Now, the reason I said the devil does not want to kill you is because you take that situation. If Wormwood's patient dies, he does actually, sorry. He dies in the London Blitz because this was published in 42, so it's World War II. But this is not good because the guy's lost. He lost his patient because now his patient has been taken, he's achieved the victory that we talked about. He's taken into heaven to be with God. The devils can no longer do anything to tempt the patient, right? So no, I mean, now the devil would rather you die eternally, and be lost and condemned. But you think about it, this is the easy way out. This is great. This is why Jesus says, don't fear him who can kill the body but not the soul. So
I read a book from the perspective of the devil before.
it's a delightful book. I really have toyed with the idea before of, between doing our straight Bible study, taking a break, and actually, I think there's a lot of benefit to reading. It's biblical, it's very insightful, but there's a lot of great Christian books that maybe we'll do that one day. Maybe we will. Some of you are delighted, some of you feel threatened, but it's okay. You don't have to read it if we do it, but just come for the talk. But yeah, I mean, so in that sense, you see, the devil doesn't want to kill Job, and he's pretty amenable to this arrangement. That if he can at least make him suffer. Because, yeah, exactly. And yeah, so it seems that Job is the devil's patient in this case. Then he'll do that, because the last thing you would want is to kill this guy who's righteous, and then you've lost him forever, What's that?
No fun in that.
There is no fun in that. This is a game of cat and mouse. So, yeah. I mean, you think about the bishop. I call her the lady because I can't say British names, but that sounds like Alfred Hitchcock movie. The bishop and the lady. The bishop's wife. That was a good movie. Not Alfred Hitchcock. This would be so easy if, like, Finland was advanced by a few generations and they're a bunch of fascists. It'd be so easy. The COVID thing would be so easy if it was just a straight line. The government says don't do it or we shoot you. That makes it easy. The line between good and evil then is very clear. You can see the evil for what it is. I don't think that the devil, they're not in danger of that happening to them in Finland right now. But the devil, that's not what he wants. What he wants is for them to buckle. He wants them to denounce what they've said and what the scriptures teach and just say, oh, I withdraw the book. I'll delete my Twitter. I'll go ahead and do it, That's what he wants, because it's the denial of our confession in Christ. That is what would damn and condemn us. The death, that would be perfect, okay? That's a win-win proposition. You either live and you give the devil a headache. If you die, you go to be with Christ. You win either way. But that's why he attacks our faith and our courage, because that's what the devil wants.
I think in America, he just comes in and makes our Christianity so watered down for people that they are frivolous about it.
Yes.
And over time, you don't realize that, but that's probably what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right.
So that's Devil Senior or Devil Junior they're working, but
It's someone in the bureaucracy, I think. Yeah, and there is what, I don't know that the term is original to him, but Luther talks about what is called the double persecution of the church. The double persecution of the church. Well, see, the devil attacks on two fronts. He attacks the doctrine. So, in other words, he attacks the church from within, because false doctrine is the worst of the two. That by leading people away from his word and that which we're supposed to believe and practice. When you live in a country of relative, peace and prosperity, life is good, and you're living the dream. This is the worst persecution that the devil could inflict on the church, actually, because people would be unaware. The other kind, where he kind of, in a worldly sense, he overplays his hand, is when the devil attacks the church from without, and it's manifested in the form of persecution and things like this. But it's kind of like with Job. That actually doesn't have the effect you might think, because it gives to Christian people a certain clarity that when you actually see the evil face to face, then it kind of wakes you up a little bit and you're like, oh, now I do see. I see that this really is good and evil. This is God versus the devil. And it's so clear. I mean, and I'm not demonizing her, but the prosecutor general in Finland, how can you sit there and look this lady in the face and she's asking you the question, this is a legal matter. What do you believe about the Bible? You know how insane that is? But the bishop and the lady are sitting there and they're like, well, this gives me clarity about this, that I see this for what it really is. And that is what the devil would not like, actually. Unless the prospect of killing you is going to be the occasion that leads you to fall away and to renounce the faith. Then he'd be pleased with that. Then he's got you two ways. Yeah, that's the greatest persecution that the devil inflicts, is actually when all is well, when it's sunshiny and peaceable, and everybody goes to church like in the 50s or whatever, and everybody's nice and good. But nevertheless, it's not the proclamation of the gospel, that people are hearing. So, all right. Anything about that? Anything else? Yeah, so read the Screwtape Letters. Actually, I've been cleaning. You don't believe me, but I've been cleaning. That's why it's so messy. And I was throwing out some old books, but I think I have one copy if you want it. If you want it for free. Don't say I never gave you anything, okay? If you want it, just come and ask me, and you can keep it. It wasn't mine, it's Pastor Sheridan's. So, yeah, so I'll grab that. C.S. Lewis, great, if you haven't read C.S. Lewis. Oh, is there? Yeah, well, that's true. I could do that. Yeah.
Just give it to me.
Okay, well,
Then when I'm done, I'll
we can, there you go. All right, that sounds good.
Good vacation.
The Screwtape Letters. I saw a great, there was a Christian playmaking company that, I don't know if they still do, but 10 years ago they traveled around the country. And I forget the guy's name. Is it Adam? No, not Adam. David McLean, I think he was the actor. But they did the Screwtape Letters as essentially a one-man play. You're like, well, that really would translate pretty poorly, don't you think? A bunch of letters in a hour and a half play. And it was great. The thing that I loved about it is when Wormwood's patient becomes a Christian, he's sitting in his office in hell, and the whole place starts shaking. And then there's this light that's shooting down, and then you hear, dun, 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 dun. So they used the mighty fortress, to signify the patient's conversion. I thought that was great. Anyway. So yeah, all right. Well, let's look a little more at Job. Okay. So then his trials begin in verse 13. Now there was a day when Job's sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. Now, what we've heard before is that, Job's got the 10 children. He's got the 7 sons, 3 daughters. And they travel around each other's house, still like each other. So there you go. Job is doing it right. And they feast, at the different brothers' houses all together. So they're all together. 14, and there came a messenger to Job and said, The oxen were plowing, and the donkeys feeding beside them. And the Sabians fell upon them and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Okay. Here's the first prong of the attack. And this is bad, but it's not yet worst, because the donkeys, the oxen, the livestock. So now Job's stuck. Okay. He's losing, and this is his livelihood too, right? 16, while he was yet speaking, there came another and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants. So all of his labor, and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, the Chaldeans, so those would have been today, we call Babylonians, or later on. Chaldeans formed 3 groups and made a raid on the camels, and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, your sons and your daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And behold, a great wind came across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young people, and they are dead, and I alone have escaped to tell you. All right. Now God had said, you can stretch out your hand. Satan said to God, you can stretch out your hand against everything that he has. So, not only his personal property, but the property of his children who belong to him. And it just gets worse and worse. The livestock, all the camels, they're gone. The livestock, and then, the other thing you notice, the livestock, the servants, then his children, is that sometimes there are naturalistic explanations for these things. We got the Sabians come, the Chaldeans come, but they say, the fire actually came down from God in heaven and consumed them. And then some of these things are just bizarre. The wind, there's a wind so strong that it knocks the 4 corners of the house collapses and kills all 10 of his children. And who knows who else they killed. We don't know if Job was a grandfather or great-grandfather, whatever. He's 140 years old. He's kind of, he had his time. And all dead, right, at the same time. And Job's response then, in 20. Then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshipped. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And all this Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. The signs of what he does, the tearing of the robe, shaving of his head, are signs of mourning, right? So it's not like he's celebrating, happy, but he falls on his face and he worships God. Now, which is remarkable, don't you think? I mean, it's one after another. Servant number 1 tells you this, and then number 2 tells you this, and he's lost everything, except, as we'll look at, he doesn't lose his lovely wife. But he falls down and he worships. And there's a lot of wisdom to what Job says, because Job, and he gets it now. I think he got it before because he's righteous. But he understands that old saying, you can't take it with you. Naked I came, naked I shall return. And Job knows that he is the recipient of all of these good things. And this is the thing about the way that we understand stuff. And when I say stuff, whether it's your possessions or whether it's the people in your life, okay? We believe in possessions, but we don't believe in ownership, okay? So you possess the things that are yours, and the 10 Commandments are clear about that. You shall not steal. That means don't take what belongs to somebody else. But we possess these things, and we really possess them in a trust. You do not absolutely own anything, and neither do I, okay? It's entrusted to you for you to use according to what God says, according to love of God and love of neighbor, according to his good pleasure. When God decides to take it, this is what he does. And see, Job knows this. He said, I came with nothing. I will leave with nothing. I don't own anything. God is the one. He gives, and God is the one who has the authority to take. And his name is blessed either way. I know now you're not supposed to watch it. I haven't watched it in a long time. But I love, there's an episode of The Cosby Show. Did I ever tell you I met Bill Cosby? I did. I'll tell you about that sometime. That was pre-scandal. But there's the episode of The Cosby Show when their daughter, Vanessa, is being picked on at school because, now you remember Dr. Huxtable, doctor, Mrs. Huxtable, lawyer. He could have used one. And so, but Vanessa is just so upset because they're picking on her at school because I'm rich. And Bill Cosby goes, no. Your mother and I are rich. You have nothing. And isn't that great? You have to be pretty rich for them to say that, you had a mistrial and now you get to go free. But anyway, it's really sad. It's sad all around. But see, God is rich. Job has nothing. He knows that. He's like a baby. Baby doesn't own anything. And he's going to leave in the same state that he came. And he realizes God is not stolen from him. God is the one who owns it all. He has the absolute right of ownership. What Job has been entrusted as possessions. But the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. And God knows best. He says, blessed be the name of the Lord. And in all of this, Job does not sin or charge God with wrongdoing. I think I'm going to keep going for a little bit, if you don't mind. Now you've got your sheet. Now we're in business. All right. Any comments about that? Yes, the other thing I want to tell you. And I do think this is very, very important. That statement, the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. And my note on this is on page 2 if you want to see it. But before you look at that, you notice, though, who Job says has done these things to him. The Lord giveth, the Lord taketh. Who did it? God. Yeah, he has no idea. And as far as we know, Job never knows. I mean, he doesn't know in the book itself. He never knows about this thing between God and the devil. Now, the reason this is important is, remember at the end of the book, God does vindicate Job because he says, my servant Job has spoken rightly of me. What we want to do, and this is another one of those things, kind of like the speculation about, the fall of Satan. What we want to do sometimes is we want to protect God. Because we never want to say, and this would be correct, we never want to say that God himself is evil, that God is the author of sin. That is true. But a lot of times, we try to do this thing where you look at your life and you go, all right, that I believe was the work of God. That was the work of Satan. And we want a very clear line between these things. Generally what people do when something happens and they don't like, they go, that's the devil. And then when things go my way and I get what I want, I say that's God. That is not how it is. Okay? Because the thing that you see, if you just want to use what happened with Job as a test case, if it's an example for us, then number one, you see that God and the devil are not that far apart. I mean, in terms of, it's not like the devil's out, he does his mischief, and God is just shooting down, the hellfire missiles and destroying his work. But at least in the case of Job, they are conversing. And God is just kind of like, what do you want to do? And what happens in our lives, we've talked about this before, but to remind you, because I think it's so important, there is a distinction between what we call testing and temptation. Testing is the work of God. God does allow or cause the bad things in our lives. We see that with Job. He has a purpose for it, which is the testing of our faith. And not test in the sense of God pokes you. He's like, I wonder what he's going to do. But test in the sense of refine, of strengthen. this is his goal, because our salvation and our holiness is his goal. The devil tempts. The difference between what these are, like just conceptually, the difference is the devil tempts with the aim of leading you into sin and death and apostasy. But if you look at Job, you see that it's not God does one action, and that's a test, and Satan does something else, and it's a temptation. It's all one. Okay? So, God says to the devil, do what you want to do except for this one thing. And the devil says, and when you stretch out your hand, this is what's going to happen. So even God and the devil have this understanding that you can't delineate between the work of God and the work of the devil. And you and I can't actually either. I mean, how would you do that? Unless you get like the reader of Job and you get like a view into heaven, how could you say? I know what we want to say. The things I don't like is the work of the devil. The things that I do like is the work of God, because then that justifies me and lets me off the hook, and I get to live the way that I want to live. That's not how it is. So, if somebody were to ask you, and they said, so who is it that have inflicted Job with these trials, God or the devil? The answer is yes, right? Yeah, it is ultimately God, because he is speaking rightly of God. God himself says that of Job. No idea what the devil's doing, but he says, the Lord gave, the Lord taketh away. And that at least makes sense on the level of, if he hadn't allowed it, it would not have happened, right? So there is a true sense in which the devil is the instrument and the tool of God. And again, he's accomplishing his own purposes. Kind of like with Joseph. You know, we just finished Joseph 2 weeks ago. The things that happened to Joseph really are bad and evil. But he tells his brothers, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. So he doesn't say the thing itself is good, but he says God took it, he used it. The devil was doing his thing with the temptation. You know, Joseph's brothers are doing their thing. But God undermines the entire thing by doing what he wants to do. And it's in no compromise to the goodness of God. Right? Because God and the devil are not equal. Right? It's not like the yin-yang and all of this nonsense. They're good and evil are not eternally opposite and equally powerful. Right? Evil is always lesser. It preys on the good. But God, who is always good, he takes the evil thing and he uses it however he will. And that's the sense in which we believe that God, in a true sense, is the cause of all things. If he's not, we're kind of in trouble. Because then he's asleep at the helm, you know, and that you don't want that kind of God. Yeah, John.
Well, I hope you're not going to ask me where it's at, but it seems to me I remember there's something in there about God will only allow to happen what you can bear. So then when I think life is good, maybe it's because I can't bear more than that. You know,
well, that's true, yeah.
A sad thing to think about myself, but it
well,
may be the truth, you know?
Well, you know, and that's the thing, like God always gives us that which is good for us. So, you know, it's kind of like, I mean, you read the book of Job, you're like, man, I don't want to be any more righteous than I am already. Now, I do have to say, because you brought it up, the old saying, God will not give you more than you can handle, is not in the scriptures. But what is in the scriptures, and I believe it's 1 Corinthians, where he says no, it's James. God tempts no one, but with the temptation, he will give you the way out. But in fact, God, what we see with Job, the truth is actually God does overwhelm us all the time. You know, that he brings Job to nothing, that he grinds him down in the dust, that Job says, you consider me your enemy. In that sense, he does, because it's when you get to the point that you have nowhere else to go. You have no other resource. You have no occasion to trust in yourself or your abilities or what you perceive as your own righteousness. This is exactly where God wants us. It's eventually where we will all be, because when we die, then God's finally got us 100%. You know, it is true though in terms of temptation that you know, as a Christian, and temptation takes many forms, but as a Christian, as somebody who's a child of God, as somebody who has the Holy Spirit dwelling within him, we do have, by grace, we have that ability to resist the evil, to find a way out. It doesn't make us sinless, but we do actually, because it's Christ himself lives in and works with us. That we can handle in that sense. But everything else, I mean, life will kill you. You know, it will get you. It'll overwhelm you one way or another. But thanks for bringing that up.
It all boils down to one word, Faith.
Indeed, yeah, and that's all. And see and that's all that Job has got in the end. You know, old saying is, if you have health, your health, you have everything.
He has his wife, right?
He does have his wife, his lovely wife.
Does he know at the end there? When
Yeah.
they all...
Yeah, she never faces any consequence. No, that's okay. Yeah, when we started, we did some bird's eye view stuff with Job last week, and all it says is that God doubles his fortunes. It is interesting, he's got the exact same number of sons and daughters. And my private opinion is that it's the same children raised from the dead. Because whereas you can replace the cow, I don't think you can replace the children. That's just my opinion. But that's my opinion. Yeah. But anywho, I'm just seeing how much rope I'm getting here. Okay. Anybody else? Anything? Okay. Well, let's at least try. So let's try to do 2. And then what that means is next week we'll get into all the bloviating, the speeches. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said to Satan, "From where have you come?" Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil? He still holds fast his integrity, like I told you he would, although you incited me." You see that? Not you went and did your own thing. You incited me against him to destroy him without reason. Then Satan answered the Lord and said, "Skin for skin. All that a man has he will give for his life. But stretch out your hand and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse you to your face." And the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, he is in your hand, only spare his life." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with loathsome sores from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. And he took a piece of broken pottery with which to scrape himself while he sat in the ashes. Then his wife said to him, "Do you still hold fast your integrity? Curse God and die." But he said to her, "You speak as one of the foolish women would speak. Shall we receive good from God, and shall we not receive evil?" And all this Job did not sin with his lips. All right, so real quick, and then we'll be done. Round 2. It's not that the devil's given up, okay, because he's not admitted defeat. He's biding his time. So he goes back to God, and God allows him just a little more. And he says, because the devil says, a man will give anything for his life. If you have your health, you have everything, right? We've seen how obsessively in the last 2 years people believe that. So he said, so if you take his health, then he will curse you. I could buy that. So he's struck with this whatever terrible skin disease, such that the soothing thing for him is to take a piece of pottery and to scrape the boils off of his skin, right? But he still says, but you can't take his life. So Job is struck with the sores, and specifically what God allows is that the devil would touch his flesh. And this is honestly why I think, this is why his wife does not die, why his wife wasn't killed in the first trial. And she also doesn't seem to be ill. She is apparently immune. So, because we are, man and wife are one flesh. His wife is his flesh. The way in which the devil has struck Job's flesh is that he turns his wife against him. Because instead of weeping and mourning with Job, instead of holding fast, she's already fallen away. She's not as righteous as Job. She says, how can you hold on to your integrity? Curse God and go ahead and die. And Job is actually very kind to her, because he says in 10, he says, you speak as one of the foolish women would speak. You sound like an idiotic person, okay? So he didn't say she was a fool. He has enough honor and respect. He says, you sound like a stupid person. I'm not saying you're stupid. I'm just saying what you said was stupid, okay? But the profound thing then, so what that means then is the wife, Job's wife, is a Satan, okay? She has become an adversary and an accuser. So she is the instrument of the devil to afflict Job, to try to get him to that other kind of persecution that we talked about, not just the bodily, but the spiritual, in which he tries to get Job to renounce his faith. And he just says, that sounds like something a stupid person would say. Very unworthy of you, dear. But where he ends, and we'll have to pick up with this next time, he says, shall we not receive from the Lord good and evil? So that goes along with what we talked about before. God is, in a sense, he's the cause of all things. And therefore, we're going to talk about in what sense do we receive evil from God. So that's our cliffhanger. All right. I was bad today. Oh, well. Let's close with the word of prayer. Gracious God, our Heavenly Father, we confess that we did enter and that we do leave this world naked and without anything. Everything that we have is your good and gracious gift. And so we pray you that we would never idolize these things and hold them in the place of where we ought to fear, love, and trust in you above all things. We thank and praise you that you do work all things together for the good of those who love you and are called according to your purpose. We pray that as we face all of these things, that we realize that testing is from your hand, that we realize you use even the purposes of the devil for our sanctification and our good, that you would give us the eyes of faith to see you, that you would open our ears that we might hear your word and always be heartened by the salvation that you give to us, by which the devil is cast down, that you have given to us and applied to us the blood of the Lamb to our lives. We ask that in the strength of that salvation, you would always keep us as your own dear children, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. All right, thank you.